Welcome to Emerging with Jamal Robinson, a podcast where you hear from the diverse voices behind emerging technologies and gain useful insights for positive changes in your life and career. On today's show, I speak with Lekan Elesin. 3-month, all expense paid travel. Where are you going to go?
Maldives.
What is your most unusual skill or talent?
Supporting good governance.
Wouldn't have expected that. What's your favorite music artist, song, or album?
I like a couple of Nigerian songs, like Nathaniel Bassey and Hillsong.
What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of my family right now, which is my wife and my son, parenting.
What is your favorite book or author?
And the first one is by Calvin Newport, So Good They Can't Ignore You. And then the Stanford professor, his last name is Pfeffer. Name talks about the 7 rules of power.
If you could meet anyone throughout history, dead or alive, who would it be?
It's Nehemiah from the Bible. I think he was a very good project manager.
My dad's a pastor. I've studied quite a lot of Christianity. I've never heard Nehemiah phrased as a good project manager. That's quite interesting. 1 to 3 words that describe you the best.
Collaborative, competitive, family-driven.
And what is the last meal that you'd eat?
I think this is really Nigerian jollof rice.
Lekan is a technologist who has successfully delivered analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence solutions across multiple continents and industry segments. He is currently the Director of Data Platform and Architecture at the HRS Group, helping to drive their strategy and vision for advanced analytics. Lekan previously led product direction for data science and AI platforms as a product manager. Lekan is a competitor at heart, a gifted speaker, a storyteller, and an empathetic leader who pushes his team to be the best versions of themselves. He also draws power from his family and takes pride in his role as a present father and husband. I know you're going to enjoy the conversation with Lekan today. Let's get on to the show. Welcome to the show. Can you introduce yourself, providing your name and the current role you have?
So my name is Elesin, Lekan for short. I am Director of Data Platform at HRS Group. And I've been here for, I think, 2 years and about 5 months. And it's been an exciting journey.
So Director of Data Science, what exactly does that mean? And what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And how do you drive impact at the company?
Director of Data Platform, actually, but I also lead the data science team. So my role basically leads right now 3 teams. So one is the data platform team, which was what I started with when I joined the company. And then more recently, which is a year and a half ago, 2 cross-functional data science teams. And my role basically is first and foremost making sure we democratize access to data across the company, and then supporting multiple business product lines and within the business, or even multiple teams, to really leverage analytics for decision making and not for maybe business optimization, or maybe internal insights and then customer value.
So thinking of your role in your organization, what kind of skills do you have to lead a team and focus on the technologies you focus on?
I think number 1 is to be customer focused. That's the most important for us as HRS. It's one of our leading principles. It's even the first on our leading principles, right? It's to be really customer focused, and then to really think end to end, to walk backwards from what the problem is. And this is what I learned, I think, early in my career in getting into data science and artificial intelligence, right? Because you hear a lot of people saying, oh yeah, we need to train this new model. We learned this XYZ, but really moving away from all that is what's important for the business. And for me, it's really helping my teams to really get into what's important for the business, driving collaboration with people that are non-technical to also really understand the pain points, what they're really trying to solve. And then walking backwards along with my team into the technical details. And I think for anyone getting into data science, artificial intelligence, it's not about the models first. It's usually about the problem that you're trying to solve and then walk backwards.
When I talk to people about AI and they're intimidated or either geeking out on the technology, I always tell people focus on the business application. The technology itself is just a path to get there. As soon as something comes out that's better than AI, people will jump on that bandwagon.
Definitely.
One other thing that you didn't mention that I think you excel in is presentation and clear communication. You and I first met at Amazon, and I had this podcast in my head even 10 years ago. And you gave a presentation, and I told myself, when the podcast starts, I got to get this guy on the episode because he's an excellent speaker. He articulated himself in ways that I didn't expect. And I want to say when we had the meeting, Amazon had 4 or 5 people in there, and you just walked in by yourself and you just commanded the room. So
thank you.
Can you speak about maybe how you have been able to effectively communicate and present, as this is something that traditionally is not a strong point, let's say, for people with data science backgrounds.
This is also not my strongest. Actually, that's why I didn't mention it as a skill, but I never considered it as a skill. So I had to learn it, right? Because when I was growing up, I think I was kind of shy, but I spoke a lot. History has it that I spoke a lot. But then as I grew and I realized that if I wanted to really excel and grow in my career, I had to be able to articulate what I was talking about. I think in my second job back in Nigeria, before I moved to Germany, right, I had a manager that really put me in front of management, CEO, CFOs as early as possible. And that really forced me to really think about how to speak. One other thing I did a lot, I still do it, but not as much, is maybe 5 nights or some nights before my presentation, I practice really hard. I repeat the presentation multiple times so that I could master it. And then I came across 2 books, I think, that really helped me. Talk Like TED Talk, I can't remember the title, but one that I read recently, maybe late last year or early last year, was The Power of Voice. Those are the 2 books I would say really helped me to speak really good. I didn't consider it as a really good skill. I just thought it came naturally to me, but it was never like this.
For everyone listening, Lekan is extremely humble, but it's a great skill. And I would say it's one of his best, but he is really talented, so the other ones could be also equally good.
Thank you.
Now, focusing on the technical skills, data science is a fast-moving thing. You've probably seen the graphic like everyone else with AI and data science. It has thousands of different solutions. How do you stay up to date on these technologies as a leader? But then also, how do you make sure your team stays up to date, and where do you coach them?
So I will start with my teams, right? And I think one of the things I learned quite early was way back in, I don't remember the year, I think 2012, 13. What I do for myself is I listen to Bloomberg News a lot just to follow from the macro trends perspective, right? And the first time I heard about big data was in 2013. I just heard the news is going to be the sexiest job on the planet. And that was when I caught the bandwagon, right? As far back as that time. So that's how I stay up to date from a macroeconomic standpoint. Bloomberg, I think McKinsey sometimes, Goldman Sachs newsletters sometimes, maybe some of their podcasts on YouTube as well. But for my team, what I do is I challenge them a lot. And then for their development plans, right? This is part of it. You cannot be on my team and not stay up to date with the current trends. And it's essential for their own development and also for my development as well. And on the other side is that maybe because I'm also on the weekends or when I'm not busy with work, I'm also a machine learning hero for AWS. So I stay up to date with AWS. I read a lot of what Microsoft is doing in that space, a lot I think from the papers with code. Spend some time, maybe 30 minutes a week to really read research paper and then sometimes get into the code. But more importantly for me is the global trend, which is macroeconomic, sometimes micro with regards to the local market itself, because I'm in Germany, and then some of these cloud providers, what they write, and then what other people also do. I think I do a lot of research paper, more than most people think.
And then for someone that is looking to just get into this, Bloomberg sounds like that's approachable. Probably going and reading academic white papers will be a little bit intimidating. Are there any other resources you'd recommend for somebody that's just now getting into data science and artificial intelligence?
I think for people getting started, right, is to really think about the kind of industry you want to get into and the kind of problems that are in that industry. And then from that perspective, just reading through, I think sometimes investor documents or investor relation papers, right, or publications to really understand what the business is about or what the industry is about. And then reading top, maybe publications from someone like Jeff Bezos, I think sometimes Bill Gates, because he's quite a data-driven guy. I think for anyone who's getting started is really understanding what the macroeconomic trend looks like. And then from there, dive deep into what the industry you want to get into looks like. And then from there, get into who are the companies in this space that I might be interested in, and then get into what are the things that these companies talk about. From there, you would identify what the problems of the companies are, and then get into how might analytics solve this problem. And this is where I think a lot of people miss it. They go from the data set, which is I can get on any competition, look at the data set and work from the data set into the business. But for me, it's the other way around, which is macro, micro, get into the industry, maybe related companies that you want to be associated with and get into the problems. And then what are the hypotheses that I can build that will solve their problems? And then from there, you can just start thinking about what data sets might be available, A lot of people think it's must, but what data sets might be available that would help me to solve this problem?
I love that answer. And this is a longer way to say what you said earlier, where you start from the business problem and work backwards. And you go out to understand what are the macro trends, maybe geopolitical, what's happening in various countries, and you narrow in on industry. and then just work back from their business outcomes and then tie the technology to that versus finding the technology and trying to push it into a business outcome, which doesn't always make sense. With that said, you are one of the strongest data science leaders that I've ever met, and you're working at HRS Group, which I believe focuses on travel.
Yep.
So the optics of this, I would expect a strong data science leader to maybe be at one of the cloud service providers and working deeply ingrained into some AI department, but that is not quite the case. So maybe helping people understand how you got to HRS Group, and then what also to look at when they look at companies like HRS Group or other companies that at the surface may not seem like they have strong data science teams, but ultimately they do.
I think when we met at the AWS reInvent in 2019, I was a technical product manager for the AI platform at Scout24. But then an opportunity came to also move into product management in data science. But at that point, I think I was getting tired or getting bored of product management intentionally. So someone reached out to me, whom I know from way back in time, and said, there is an opportunity here to lead initiative. Would you be interested? I ran through the interviews and I ended up at HRS as a technical lead for the data platform. For me, it's more from the perspective of where do I want to go and how do I want to get there? And most times, a lot of people don't ask these questions to themselves with regards to from a career perspective. I remember in 2014, in my first job, just to move back a bit on the topic, I remember writing down that I want to be the number one big data professional in Africa by 2020. And I put that on my Stack Overflow profile, right? Because I'm quite technical, intentionally. And in 2020, I just went back to my Stack Overflow profile and I realized that, oh, I'm quite close to this actually. Maybe only a few people beat me to it. Like I said to the previous point, that I'm very competitive. And then for people that want to get started, I think in general, for companies like HRS, you would expect me to be in a company like, let's say, Amazon or somewhere that's really at the bleeding edge of data science. But I think I intentionally chose HRS because number one, it was in the travel space. It's an industry I've never been into, but for me, it was quite new. I wanted to learn what was happening in there. And in the travel space also, right, we have other companies that are in the retail, but in the corporate business side of travel, there's a lot of analytics that's going on in there, right? And we do that a lot at HRS. So we help our customers with figuring from procurement into payment with the expense and reimbursement. And if we break that down along with the customer journey or the customer lifecycle, there is a lot of analytics from procurement. We are optimizing the program portfolio for the travelers to get them the optimal savings. And more recently, most companies getting into sustainability, right? So how do I make sure that my travelers or my employees are traveling sustainably, and then we're optimizing for that. From the reimbursement standpoint, I know maybe you also might have a phase where you make a business trip. You will do that a lot, right? And you have to file your reimbursements. You have to put it in some Excel spreadsheets, scan all that. To be honest, that can be really annoying. So we digitize that also and say, when you work with HRS, that expense reimbursement, we take care of it. We automate it with artificial intelligence, and then we use that data to also optimize the procurement phase. We use what we learn about the customer's purchase history to really fuel how we negotiate on their behalf with the hotel. So there's a lot of analytics happening in there. It might not be transparent, but this is one of the things that we're also driving right now, right? Which is making sure that we're branding our engineering and our data science departments externally. I think quite a lot of people have seen us write a couple of blog posts. We've published some of them even on the AWS blog, but there's more to come.
Really great answer. And also a lot of knowledge dropped in there. So maybe starting back from the first thing you said, number one in the continent, and that is a pretty audacious goal. Do you ever find yourself getting intimidated? Like being number one in an entire continent, that's quite a lot of people to be number one with. And how do you balance like not putting too much pressure on yourself, but then also not selling yourself short?
I'm very competitive from my childhood. I don't know how it got into me, but on the other side is there's no pressure. For me, it's just normal, right? It's normal to be competitive. Some other people think it's not. I think sometimes my team members think, oh my, here he goes again. Yeah. But eventually they got to understand that it's with good intentions, right? So for me, it's no pressure, to be honest. If I cannot do it, then who will? Someone else has to do it, right? And it's for the common good. Even though it's a personal ambition, right? I also try to apply it to my contributions and what I write about with regards to contributing to what is happening in my own country, Nigeria. But there's no pressure, to be honest.
I love that mindset. And then getting into the company and some of the things you had mentioned, it sounds like also the advice you gave earlier of like finding a macro trend and even something that you personally experience where you go travel, you deal with this headache. Finding something that you can solve that would be an issue that was identified in your own life and you can see the practicality of solving it makes a lot of sense. It feels like there's a lot of opportunities to solve. So I'm assuming in addition to that, you probably look into some other aspects like the culture of the company, the leadership. Can you maybe just walk me through other decision criteria that you use to be able to settle on HRS?
I think first is the leadership. So I spoke with the CPO back then. I spoke with the CIO. They were quite open with regards to the challenge and also task. During the interview process, it was like, we want to solve this and we want to solve this in the shortest possible time. And for someone like me, if you want to get me up and running in the middle of the night to run, just tell me that we need this done in the shortest possible time. You will be my best friend.
I got some issues I can send your way.
Exactly. That's the first. And then the CDO, which was the chief data officer back then, also spoke with, was the person I knew is a mentor. Also told me about the experience, told me about the culture, told me about the challenge. Even though I'm quite technical, to be honest, my approach is more, where can we make impact? And that has to do a lot with culture change. And this is one of the things that I see a lot of technical people miss out on, is that they think it's about technology. The technology is just an enabler. It's a means to an end, right? It's not the technology on its own. And once you introduce new technology, expect that there will be pushback from a cultural standpoint because you're trying to enable change. And once I saw there was an opportunity to change a company, I jumped on it.
It sounds like a very thorough thought process. So people listening that have not been in data science will listen and say, oh, that's great. People that are listening that have been in data science will probably call out that when you go to, let's just say, non-data science primary companies, so working at Snap and Meta and Microsoft and Amazon, these companies, data science and AI is at the forefront. But sometimes when you work at a company whose core business is outside of advanced analytics or data science or AI, you get into a lot of contrast because the business has certain priorities, and then you're sometimes like up against the significant revenue driving decision. How do you navigate that when you're trying to also get your team motivated, but at the same time sell other executives on the business outcomes that data science can drive, while you're also managing the core aspects of the business that other leaders may want to focus on over the things you're trying to drive?
I think for me, it became a lot easier over time because every company at some point wants to become more data-driven. HRS is a 50-year-old company. It's not new. And when we told the story of HRS, that HRS is a data company from when it was started 50 years back. When I told the story and when we tell the story, everybody that have been in HRS for a long period said, that's true. And the point I'm trying to make is that you need to find a common ground that people can relate with. And the example I give people when I talk internally is that HRS started about 50 years ago. Lots of people come into Cologne, and then the father of our current CEO said, how can we make sure that we get people that are coming to this particular city in Germany to make reservations and get maybe the cheapest rates possible? And he started writing it down on a workbook in maybe a note. And that is already compiling data at that point in time. When I talk to people internally and I explain to them that the foundation of the company started from collecting data manually, it becomes a lot easier to tell the story of, oh, I want to listen to you. How can your team help? And how can I be part of what you're doing? How can I support you? How can I enable you? Sometimes the discussions that land on my teams are a lot more than the capacity of the team. But right, we find a way to solve that. And that's the beauty of it, right? That we want to change how businesses stay, work, and pay. But internally, we really understand that the data is the most important asset of the company. It's the tenet on which the company was built or is built and is still running on top. And we need to use it to deliver value to our customers. When I tell the story this way, it's a lot easier for every other person to understand what I'm talking about. Then we can get into the technical details and all that interesting technology, but then making sure that you adjust the context of what you're talking about to who the audience is. I think one of the things that I learned on my journey.
Adjusting what you say to the audience you're speaking to and like finding a bridge to bring them across on underscores my point that you're an excellent speaker, and that's a top skill that you don't want to take credit for.
Thank you.
With that said, if I look at your experience, it also looks like you're a continual student and you go out, I look at the amount of certifications, and you even talked about like the white papers that you're reading on the weekend. How do people sort through the plethora of information and online courses and articles and so forth to find out what can make sense for them?
So I think what can make sense for people getting started is really getting to find a course. I think there's something on Coursera on business analytics. I took that course on Coursera, I think, along with a friend of mine back then, which we were challenging each other to see how fast we could move and how quickly we could wrap it up. It really helped me to really understand how people think about business problems from an analytics standpoint. And then I would say the foundation for that is do a course on Coursera, if possible. If you're enrolled in a master's, you take an elective in business analytics. And then from that, you can lay on top advanced capabilities. So you can build from linear regression to lasso, whatever algorithm, but then have the basic understanding of decision making when it comes to analytics within a business context. I was talking to my sister recently, who's years older than I am, and then she enrolled in a master's studying analytics. And then she sent me one of her coursework, right? And in the coursework, I could also see that even the academia, they're getting it wrong. They said, oh yeah, look at the data, this data in some website like that. These are two data sources. Tell us the business problem that can be solved. I'm like, no. You start from the business problem and then you walk backwards to the data set. You don't go the other way around. And I think it's fair for the academia to do it that way because they might not be in the industry, but training students or training people that will eventually get into the industry to think like that would lead to a disconnect. And that's why a lot of data scientists, maybe entry-level data scientists, are really frustrated because they think, oh yeah, there is some CSV file that's already prepared because they've been in these competitions and that's what they get. And then they get into the industry, they see that data is scattered across multiple places in different forms. But if they had walked backwards from what is the problem the company is trying to solve, and then build the scientific approach of building a couple of hypotheses and then testing them and walking backwards or really iterating and understanding the problem, then it becomes a lot easier for them to really get into the industry.
I love this data point as it brings out a couple of things. You had mentioned like the data being spread internally. And the difference between a data science competition where you start off with the data set is when you're working at large enterprises, typically that data is spread and that data is owned by each individual group, which requires you to go out to that group and be able to sell to them and give a narrative as to why they would want to, one, invest the time, but then two, give you access to the data and so forth. So I love how you're tying all these things together. And something else that I read from what you were saying is, and then also looking at your online profile, you've educated yourself from multiple platforms. So Coursera you mentioned, but then there's also like Wharton Online, but then there's also edX, which is, I forgot the acronym, but online education system. So it sounds like getting a diversity of resources and not using one as a simple source of truth makes the most sense. Most people may not have a sister that's in university that they can borrow information from, but sounds like going out and talking to as many people as possible to just get a depth and breadth of information is the best approach.
Yeah, definitely. From my background, right, I've been in telecommunications, retail, and retail even split into online retail for cars, online retail for apartments, now in online for hotels. So I think diversity really helps to build a better picture of what you want to learn, right? If I learn from Wharton, I'm also considering a course at some point in time, very soon. But then it's from a different university. I also think I took something from INSEAD, I think, at some point on fintech, which was totally different from what I do on a daily basis, right? And lots of people were asking me, so why fintech? I'm like, I just want to learn something new. And when I had that course, I think I did quite well. But then the conversations I started having internally within the company changed. For me, that it's very important to really cut across multiple knowledge, leverage online as much as possible, and then don't limit to one learning resource.
I love that because also there's certain lessons you learn that you weren't looking for. So for example, fintech is such a heavily regulated industry. If you weren't looking into that or healthcare, you may think of data science one way, but when you start to think about regulations, it just adds a different level of depth into your understanding and how to approach customers. It makes you a better leader and or a data scientist or all of the above. Let's now switch our focus to learn a little bit more about you. You had also mentioned your sister and reaching out to her and her giving you access to her homework. What other support structure have you had throughout your career to allow you to get to this level of success?
I will start with my wife. She got to know me, I think, my last year in college. Even though she was already out of college back out of university, she already graduated. She's one of, if not the most important support structure that I have. I have a couple of friends. Now I'm in Germany, way back in Nigeria, so I moved to Germany. I have some friends that we work together in Nigeria who are now in Germany with me, so we have conversations and we challenge each other on a couple of things, and then we also celebrate successes together. And then, like I said, right, I grew up in a faith-based family, so I also have my local community, being part of the church, that's also supportive.
I can tell your mind is almost always active, and it's probably the equivalent of a bodybuilder with 1% body fat. But as far as the physical world, are there any things you do to keep yourself active and healthy and performing at a high level?
Yes, so quite a number of things that I do. Like you said, you mentioned 1% body fat. I think I have 1% body fat actually. And this is a very funny story. So when I was a lot younger, my mom actually took me to the doctor and said, look at this boy, his veins are outside. And the doctor said, yeah, I think it's because it doesn't have so much body fat. And my wife quarrels with me a lot on that, argues with me, why do you eat a lot and then you're not adding fat? So I think I do daily walks just to keep my body active. I walk around a lot, sometimes with my son, sometimes together as a family. Sometimes on a couple of trips, I visit the gym. And then every month or every other month, my friends and I, we hang out to play badminton and lawn tennis.
As far as a mentor, so you mentioned like having friends and also your wife being a key part of your life. How have mentors played a role in your life/career?
They've played a huge role. A lot of them really helped me in opening doors that I could not open on my own. Some of them became sponsors. I wrote something a while back that people need to move beyond mentorship into sponsorship, especially for people of color, right? A lot of times people of color wouldn't get access to places unless someone that is not a person of color or even people of color actually sponsors them. And I think my mentors some of them have been really good sponsors. I remember in my second job, my manager back then was actually a mentor and then a sponsor. So when I mentioned about the communication skills, right? When I learned it, he made sure that he wasn't present when we had our first presentation about the complicated ML algorithm that we built at that point and made sure that we presented it. And for me, it was eye-opening. I remember at some point, he even gave me an opportunity to present to the senior advice on agriculture to the vice president in Nigeria. Right? So they've been really good mentors and sponsors. They opened the doors for me. People that are not of color, you need to move beyond mentorship into sponsorship.
I appreciate that differentiation. I talked about this recently on an episode where people do think through mentors, but mentors can give you the advice, but sponsors often have the power and access and resources, be that money or ability to enable you in a position. So having both of those balance out. And sometimes that is in a different persona. Sometimes it's all in one person, but I appreciate you differentiating that. You seem like a highly successful man who, no matter what you do, you always have success, but I'm assuming you've had some kind of career failure at some point, even if only for a second. Can you maybe speak on those at a high level and just kind of what you did in those situations, how you learned from it and used it to become a better person?
The successes are built on tons of failure. I have a lot of failure belts. So in my first job, I wanted to be a data scientist and it was a startup. CTO interviewed me and said, oh yeah, you're going to help with the data science and all this analytics stuff. Because I didn't want to do anything with regards to software engineering back then. 3 months into the job, my manager, who was reporting to the CTO, then called me and said, Lekan, you see, everybody else is delivering. You're not. So if we don't see any change in the next month, we will need to have a different conversation. That means I was going to get fired. And most people...
Damn, 30 days?
Yeah.
That's messed up.
I think I started telling this to my skip levels at work that you need to understand that even if you see me as this really smart guy, right, or smart person, I have a history. I know where I'm coming from. I've seen it all. I've seen failures that meant that I will be fired in the next 30 days. And in that time, I didn't like the feeling of being fired because I got the job right out of university. And what I did was I had a very stern and difficult conversation with the CTO, was not in the country back then. And then you hired me to do this, right? I understand. Now I'm beginning to see that the expectations are different. So what do I need to do? Then he clarified that, yeah, even though we hired you to lead our analytics or to do something on analytics, we're not there yet as a company. So you need to adjust a bit to make it work. And this is not to brag, but I learned, I think, about 6 programming languages in 6 weeks. I learned Scala, Java, Python, HTML, CSS, JavaScript in 6 weeks because I didn't want to have that on my record. I was fired. And then 30 days after, my manager had a discussion with the CTO that there's something different about this guy. He's really changed. And then I built an online platform that was, I think, doing 10,000 users for the company, 10,000 users on a daily basis. And really, the revenue back then was really good. I think that's the first failure. And this is for anybody starting out in data science, right? Once you join, be sure when you want to join a company that this is what you're going to be doing. Because you already have expectations that you'll be a data scientist. The company might be in a different maturity level when they hired you. So you need to clarify and be sure. And also be flexible, right? Even though I did software engineering back then, after I think at my second job, I then became a data science engineer. which now is called machine learning engineer, and then evolved my role from that point. But I think that's one of the biggest learnings for me, which sometimes I would say it's a failure, but I would also see it more as a learning that really set the foundation for me.
Man, I'm probably going to have to start calling you a genius. Like 6 languages in 6 weeks? That's like unprecedented.
Yeah, I think most people can do it, to be honest.
In the US, the average reading level is the 8th grade level. So I don't know if people are making that jump to 6 languages in 6 weeks, but wow.
To be honest, I think most people can do it. My motivation was the fact that I didn't want to be fired, and I wanted to prove a point that you were wrong by telling me that you wanted to fire me. Another learning I took from that is there are ways to coach people. I learned during that point in time that maybe his communication really maybe challenged me, but other people might have taken it in a different direction and maybe become depressed that they were going to be fired or thought about a different career path. So when I talk to people right now, it's quite different. I say, yeah, I see that you need to make improvements because I have regular one-on-ones with my own direct reports. I see that you need to make improvements in this space. So we're going to draft together a learning that will work for you. I will push you, but if you know that this learning plan is too aggressive, just let me know so that we work together on something that works. And then over time, the people see their own improvement. And for me, that's one of the things that brings me joy, which is this person was at this point in time in their career and then they've become better.
One of the things that made me think 30 days was too soon, it sounds like your manager didn't do what you did, which is to have like open conversations periodically. They just waited until last minute and pulled the carpet from under your feet, but they didn't know they were working with a genius who could learn 6 languages in 6 weeks and knock stuff out. So I not only appreciate that you were able to not go to a negative place with that and said, hey, let me just put my best foot forward. But it sounds like you've also carried that into your career to where you've gotten to the point of leadership and now you're not repeating those mistakes because you can have a more empathetic approach, having been there before. I'm also looking at your life outside of work and it looks like you do a lot to help other people. So if you could maybe speak to the NYSC Charity Community Service Department group that you're the president of and why you got involved, what you do, and the impact that organization is trying to drive.
After university in Nigeria, so once you complete your 4 years or 5 years or 5+X, depending on how that looks, you then have this 1 year that you have to volunteer. I think it's involuntary because you have to compulsorily do it, except you're not older than a certain age. So that's the National Youth Service Corps, and that's compulsory for university graduates in Nigeria. So it's just this 1 year program that you have to be part of. So when I joined my own time, right, I was quite lucky actually. It just landed on my plate to be the president. Like I said, I would say it multiple times. And I think a lot of people in some way or the other, don't be laid back, embrace competition. And by competition, I mean healthy competition. Always strive to be the best. I think I came across a book when I was in secondary school by Jack Welch, which is be number 1 or number 2 or get out of your field. And this is my driving force. So becoming the president landed on my plate, but then I had to push even people that were volunteers in my team, then that I'm going to make sure that I'm going to leave the most amount of money for the next person coming up. And we're going to make sure that we do a lot of community work. Sometimes I still go back and look at the pictures we donated to an orphanage, and I think it was the biggest that they've ever seen. It was in one of the middle belt states in Nigeria, in the secondary school there. And it's one of the biggest they've ever seen. So for me, I was lucky to have that position and I'm really grateful for it. But then it's also, what do I want to give back, right? And make sure that everybody understands that this is about giving back. It's not about spending.
As you talk, I feel like I'm speaking to like a Michael Jordan or LeBron James or depending on where you're from, like a Messi or Ronaldo. But you almost remind me of the athlete's mindset, which in their situation, they can have a lot of areas that are unknown. And they have to have extreme levels of confidence, not to the level of arrogance, although some people may argue that some of those names I mentioned are a little bit arrogant. But where do you put the value on your ability to not go to places of doubt? Or do you go to places of self-doubt, but you just quickly snap out of it? Or
I do go to places of doubt. I do. I think it's, for me, I'm human, right? So I was in a company dinner at some point, I think in 2021, just outside when we started getting out of the pandemic. And I sat at the table and when I first saw the invite in my calendar, it says company leaders. So I was there. I think at that point I was still the head of. And on that table, I was the only Black person there. And that itself is, you know it, right? I got into a place of doubt, like, what am I doing here? But then establishing conversation also, because I speak a bit of German once in a while when it's compulsory, helped me to really get out of it. So I do get into place of doubt, but I try to snap out of it. And then another one, when I got promoted to director, we had another team dinner. This was with the CEO and a couple of other company leaders. And I was in a restaurant. It was a very fancy restaurant. They only served wine from Vienna, from Austria. And then the only colored person I saw there was taking jackets. And I felt it was quite touching for me. I've had really crazy experiences. I can share as much as if you want, right? And it was really touching for me. No, you can do a lot better than this, right? Even though I sat there, squared my shoulders, I still felt like, I wish I could drag you to this table to sit with me. Another experience of self-doubt, I was to speak at a conference in Berlin in 2019, just before reInvent. I felt I was dressing cool, so I wore a white shirt, black jeans, and a black bomber jacket, only to walk into the conference and realize that the people were wearing those, the same thing.
Oh, wow.
And then most of the people serving were black. And I had to go into the speaker's lounge. And immediately I got into the speaker's lounge, people looked at me like, what are you doing here? You don't look like the regular person that comes in here. At that point, I doubted myself. But when I went on stage, my great presentation skills came about. Even though my presentation was about 30 minutes, I spoke for at least 6 hours to different people about their company problems trying to scale AI.
And to maybe zoom in, so you're in this room, you are wearing what I consider to be like a waitress or waiter's outfit, and then you need to get on stage and speak in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Mm-hmm. Like from that, I'm in the room, I don't feel comfortable to, I'm getting on stage. I could assume that with the way that you prepare, your preparation is what gave you confidence, but is there anything else that you can maybe help people understand, like how to make that bridge from not comfortable, how to get on stage, master performance?
I speak to myself, so just to reiterate my understanding of who I am and what I can do and my stand in the society as a person and my contribution to the society. So sometimes I say to myself, like, I think what I did was walked in, sat down, squared my shoulders, brought out my laptop, and then I started speaking to myself internally, like saying different things that will build my confidence internally to myself. These are things I cannot say because sometimes people call it meditation. To me, it's just faith-based declarations to myself to really make sure that I don't miss my step, because I know the reason why I went to that presentation is to make sure that people heard and people understand that even though I'm a person of color, right, I have more than my color to offer.
Very elegantly said. What I love, the subcontext of what you said, is you pulled yourself out of the situation. You thought about, why am I there? I'm there to serve a purpose, to help and inspire and enable other people. It made it about that, not about your own individual feelings. And ultimately that led to what I'm sure was an amazing presentation and standing ovation. Really great story to leave us with. Yeah. I want to wrap this up, but before I do so, is there anything that you'd like to leave people with?
Overall, I think one of the things that has helped me a lot is an appreciation of my background. When I speak, most people think I'm a very brilliant person. I gave an example of I was almost fired in my first job, but then it's to really look at where am I as a person, where are we as people, and then look at what change can I effect. And I'm still asking myself the question till date, right? Which is, how do I make impact that has global footprint? So I grew up in a city called Abeokuta in Ogun State in Nigeria, which is not popular for most people, maybe until recently. Most people don't know. Most people assume that, oh yeah, you must have stayed in maybe the economic hub of Nigeria, maybe Lagos. You must have been schooled in one of the best schools. I didn't school in the best school. Even if I mention my university, the university I graduated from, you will not assume that computer science is studied there. But then I looked at, I want to have a good global footprint, and I want to make sure that everything I do can touch people across multiple continents in the world. And I think everybody can have this mindset. In general, that's one of my driving forces. And I would say once in a while, people should take the scientific approach into building their careers and be flexible. If it's not data science, it's data science. The word just came about maybe 1990 something or 2000 and something, right? People have been doing other things before that time. So be flexible enough to know that the industry is changing, but be rigid enough or be stubborn enough to know that there is a vision that I'm running with, and I want to have a global footprint and then help people. For me, what brings me happiness right now is, number one, seeing my family. Number two, seeing the people that work with me at work become really good at what they're doing. And sometimes when I discuss with my wife about work, she's like, this person was like this before, and this person is like this right now. This is really good. I'm like, yeah, but it's also for them, right? It's the impact that we can have when we help people to become better. It's beyond the job. It's beyond the workplace. Sometimes it's generational because you help people to really become good at what they do, and their earning power increases. They can sponsor their family. They can also sponsor other people.
In addition to helping people, myself included, I think you inspire a lot of people. There's an ability for you to talk and for it to have exponential impact. what's the best way to get in contact with you or reach out?
So the best way is LinkedIn. I think it's the easiest way because I'm always active. From there, you can get my email, send an email, and then I respond.
What type of things would you like people to reach out to you for?
So the primary thing that people reach out for me for is, data science, how can I get started? And on the other side is I also coach people in product as well. So if you want to talk about product, how to get started in product, I talk about that. Anything, right? You have questions about AI, ML, the industry, where it's going to, where it's coming from, money. If you want to talk to me about how to manage your finances, feel free. I do that also.
Lekan, I really appreciate your time coming onto the show. There's a lot that we've all learned from you. And please go back to your family, get some rest, and have a good weekend. And looking forward to catching up sometime in the future.
Thank you so much, Jamal. Till next time.
That wraps our conversation. Many thanks to Lekan for sharing his story and for the gems of knowledge he's dropped during our discussion. I end each show with an inspirational career quote. Today's quote reads, "The most authentic thing about us is our capacity to create, to overcome, to endure, to transform, to love, and to be greater than our suffering," which comes from the Nigerian-British poet and novelist Ben Okri. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. And leave a rating or review, as it really helps to amplify the message so others can discover this content and benefit from it. And we'd love more user-submitted quotes. I plan to read them at the end of each show. Instructions on how to submit those quotes are in the show notes. That's all for today's show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, peace